Hello, tributes, and welcome back to Ashes of the Hunger Games. In this episode, we will be going over the 2nd century surviving victor lore, I guess you could say. Before this video begins, I would like to thank Andrew McLean, because I used a bit of his art in this video, unlike the last one. I'd also like to thank Christian Blanco and Laura McCouch, who wrote Tales of the Hunger Games and Panem Reborn, respectively. Without those two, this series would not exist. Without any of those three people, the series would not exist. So, thank you to all three of them for also giving me inspiration to do this series. But anyways, yeah. This video will have my voice in it. So there's that. And there is an outro slide, so, be prepared for that. But anyways, let's get to what the victors are doing now. After the iconic and historic events of the 200th Hunger Games, many capital citizens were happy with the outcome of these games and were excited to see the next century. Some surviving victors would also be excited for the next century, more notably the career victors. Back in District 1, 4 surviving victors still lived there. Malaya Lawson, victor of the 171st Hunger Games, the only living victor of the Panem Reborn files from District 1, could be seen painting scenes from the 200th Hunger Games, selling them for profit. Meanwhile, Gleam Backrock, victor of the 178th Hunger Games, Aluma Bates, victor of the 186th Hunger Games, and Alumo Bates, victor of the 185th Hunger Games, could be seen hanging out together in the bars of the district, joking and living life to the fullest. In the beginning of June, the year of the 201st Hunger Games, training academies were shut down in all career districts in preparation for a year of the games that the capital would refer to as the Nostalgia Year. After the training academies in District 1 were closed down, the victors who still lived in the district started to protest. Meanwhile, the only other living victor of District 1, Crystal Chanel, victor of the 200th Hunger Games, stayed in District 2, protesting the closing of the training academies there with the living victors there. Meanwhile, in District 2, 7 victors survived the century. Argentus Steele, victor of the 154th Hunger Games, and Caius Rigg, victor of the 173rd Hunger Games, were the only victors from the Panem Reborn files from District 2 left alive. On a good day, Argentus and Caius could be seen illegally training tributes for the 201st Hunger Games. Callista Yurun, victor of the 180th Hunger Games, could be seen hanging out with Cepheus Becker, victor of the 199th Hunger Games, and Jezebel Becker, victor of the 200th Games, and Crystal Chanel, victor of the 200th Games, allowing her kids to run around with Cepheus and Jezebel and Crystal's other children. Maximus Fox, victor of the 179th Hunger Games, and Aphenia Allard, victor of the 187th Hunger Games, would also be seen together a lot. A rumor would begin only a few months before the 201st Hunger Games, stating that Maximus and Aphenia were having affairs with each other. This was eventually proven incorrect by Maximus and Aphenia themselves, but the damage to their reputation had already been done. In District 3, only 3 victors survived the 2nd century. Clarion Mezu, victor of the 160th Games, was the only living District 3 victor from the Panem Reborn files. Clarion could be seen mostly hanging out in his Victor Village house, staring into the distance out of the large window in the back of his house. Meanwhile, Arsenica Ballander, victor of the 188th Hunger Games, and Almenio Vizier, victor of the 194th Hunger Games, could be seen hanging out with each other in the bars of the district. Whenever they were not seen together, Almenio could often be seen in his Victor Village house, painting scenes from his time in prison. Most of his painting involving fights. In District 4, 6 victors were alive after the 2nd century. Brooke Barakoy, victor of the 172nd Hunger Games, Fen Scarper, victor of the 152nd Hunger Games, and Arroyo Morales, victor of the 165th Hunger Games, could be seen together most of the time in the bars of the district. Sometimes Benji Triton, victor of the 177th Hunger Games, could also be seen there, but rarely. Whenever Benji isn't with the older victors in the bars and clubs of the district, he could be seen hanging out with Kabea Herricks, victor of the 193rd Hunger Games, and Corinne Brindisi, victor of the 181st Hunger Games. Kabea was the youngest of these victors, being in her 20s, while Corinne was in his 30s and Benji had turned 40 a few months before the 200th Hunger Games. Whenever they aren't with Benji, Corinne, and Kabea, whenever they aren't with Benji, Corinne and Kabea could be seen hanging out in the playgrounds in the district. Kabea swinging on a swing, and Corinne sitting on a bench looking at the beautiful flowers. In District 5, only 3 victors survived the 2nd century. Cher Bekele, victor of the 170th Hunger Games, and Van Jennings, victor of the 156th Hunger Games, could often be seen together. Cher and Van also had rumors surrounding them that they had become dating after the deaths of their wives. This rumor was eventually proven false, with Cher actually stating that she was dating someone else. Meanwhile, Anti-Man Westinghouse, victor of the 195th Hunger Games, had stayed in the capital, only coming back to District 5 for official events like the Hunger Games. In the capital, he could often be seen hanging out with London, joking and laughing and watching people watching. A rumor surrounded this pair as well, stating that Anti-Man and London were dating. This rumor was eventually proven false when Cher proposed to London. In District 6, 6 victors survived the 2nd century. Leon Taylor, victor of the 145th Hunger Games, and Lily Taylor, victor of the 146th Hunger Games, could often be seen hanging out together in Leon's Victor's Village house. Both of them had problems moving around at this age and needed wheelchairs. Australis Merlot, victor of the 196th Hunger Games, would often help push the wheelchairs whenever Leon and Lily needed to go anywhere. Meanwhile, Kalita Tepper, victor of the 162nd Hunger Games, could often be seen hanging around the clubs of the district, finding peace and solace in drugs. Kalita would do so much snorkeling at her old age that she would die just 10 days before the reapings of the 201st Hunger Games at the age of 77. Michigan Luther, victor of the 196th Hunger Games, could be seen around the bars and clubs of the district, finding peace and solace in drugs, sex, and drinking. Although Australis, her now husband, didn't approve of this life she led, she still lived this life, causing Australis to drift away. Although Australis would try everything to keep the pair together, Michigan and Australis would end up getting a divorce after the 215th Hunger Games. Finally, Honolulu Headhunter Hedstrom, victor of the 197th Hunger Games, could be seen in the mental asylum, still trying to seduce Dr. Honduras Mendez. Although Honolulu was the prettiest District 6 victor in the most recent years, Honolulu was still finding it hard to get this doctor to fall for her. It was this year, just before the 201st Hunger Games reapings, that Honolulu would photograph Honduras kissing a different resident in the psych ward. In District 7, only 6 victors survived the 2nd century. Evora Figaro, victor of the 143rd Games, and Kyria Tamarisk, victor of the 153rd Games, could often be seen hanging out with each other in Evora's Victor's Village house, Eventually, a citizen of the district would catch Evora and Kiri kissing each other. Later, it was revealed by the pair themselves that the pair had been dating ever since Kiri's wife died 2 years ago. Hollis Marlowe, victor of the 174th Hunger Games, and Jason Huff, victor of the 163rd Hunger Games, could often be seen hanging out in Hollis's Victor's Village house, painting scenes from their lives in the district. Hollis and Jason would also have a dating rumor surrounding them. The only problem being that their significant others were still alive. This scandalous love affair would spread like wildfire throughout Panem, and eventually everyone knew about it, including Hollis and Jason's significant others. This would cause Hollis to come out on stage and state that her and Jason never dated, although she did have feelings for him. Jack Jordan, victor of the 176th Hunger Games, could often be seen in District 4 hanging out with the other members of the Big Five. Benji Triton, victor of the 177th Hunger Games, Gleam Backrock, victor of the 178th Hunger Games, Maximus Fox, victor of the 179th Hunger Games, and Callista Yurun, victor of the 180th Hunger Games. This group had become very close friends, especially after Jack got his mental health fixed at the Victor Therapy group. Finally, Birch Kim, victor of the 196th Hunger Games, could often be seen in the clubs in the capital, finding solace in sex and drugs. Birch would eventually meet the love of her life here, Jade Ferrari, victor of a future Hunger Games. Although there was 15 years of an age difference between the pair, Birch and Jade would end up dating each other after Jade's victory, and would end up marrying each other during the 220th Hunger Games. In District 8, only 2 victors survived the second century. Scarlett Farisle, victor of the 150th Hunger Games, and Andrew Tollett, victor of the 190th Hunger Games, could often be seen hanging out together in Andrew's Victor's Village house. Andrew would stare out of his window on most days, watching the water splash against the outside of his houseboat. Meanwhile, Scarlett would be painting scenes from her games, to great interest from Andrew. In District 9, only 1 victor survived the second century. Flaxen Korsakov, victor of the 161st Hunger Games, could often be seen crying in his Victor's Village home. He had failed to mentor so many young men and women to victory. The deaths of Tef, Panatina, and Barlon pushed him over the edge. After their deaths during the 195th Hunger Games, Flaxen dove into a life of drugs and alcohol. In District 10, only 4 victors survived the second century. Briscoe Burnett, victor of the 169th Hunger Games, could often be seen with Wolfmark Saunders, victor of the 189th Hunger Games, giving him tips on mentoring, just in case Wolfmark ends up needing to mentor tributes without Briscoe one day. Meanwhile, Antoinette Aguilar, victor of the 183rd Hunger Games, and Anastasia Chavez, victor of the 189th Hunger Games, could often be seen hanging out together. Antoinette and Anastasia would talk mostly about Anastasia's marriage to Wolfmark, and how the pair had started the trend of co-victors marrying each other, as Crystal and Jezebel were now married. In District 11, only 4 victors survived the second century. Agapa Zolkova, victor of the 198th Hunger Games, the only female victor of District 11 left, could be seen hanging out with Abutalon Bishop, victor of the 184th Hunger Games, at her Victor's Village house. The pair would have a dating rumor surrounding them, but they would quickly prove it wrong, saying they were just friends, and even offered up video footage from the security cameras in the district as proof. Basil Breyer, victor of the 151st Games, and Durian Fennell, victor of the 175th Games, could often be seen hanging out together, talking about the experiences they went through in their games. Basil described in detail the finale of his games in sign language, still remembering every gory detail. Meanwhile, Dorian described in detail his kill of the boy from 2 to get the victory. Eventually, Andrew Tillett, victor of the 190th Hunger Games, and Basil would work together to make a sign language class within schools. Each victor would take this class along with the students of each district. The sign language classes in districts that weren't 8 or 11 would be taught by capital-appointed teachers, while the class in District 8 would be taught by Andrew himself, and the class in District 11 would be taught by Basil himself, as both victors were born deaf. In District 12, only 4 victors survived the second century, and Angel Horowitz-Lip, victor of the 191st Hunger Games, the only remaining female victor from District 12, would be released from prison just a month before the 201st Hunger Games, being bailed out by her husband, who is still unnamed in the files to this day, even though he was a big, important part of a victor's life. Meanwhile, Acion Blanken, victor of the 182nd Hunger Games, Hopper Horowitz-Flickerman, victor of the 190th Hunger Games, and Abreva Heidman, victor of the 192nd Hunger Games, could be seen hanging out around the Capitol. Them being cousins just added to their bond. The group would be there for each other a lot more often than before, this being especially evident during the funeral of Mercy Elizabeth Horowitz, victor of the 190th Hunger Games. In District 14, only 1 victor survived the second century. Charlotte Hughes, victor of the 195th Hunger Games, could often be seen alone in her victor's village house, wishing someone would live near her. She didn't have many friends after her victory from her home district, living a very solitary life, only ever really talking to people when she'd see fellow victors every year. Finally, in District 15, only 2 victors survived the second century. Elise Leger, victor of the 155th Hunger Games, could often be seen with Sasha Marie, victor of the 147th Hunger Games. It was eventually revealed by Elise herself after the death of Sasha that she and Sasha had been dating ever since after the 175th Hunger Games. This revelation caused cheering throughout the Capitol. Whenever Elise wasn't with Sasha, she'd be practicing her gymnastics in order to stay in shape, even late into her 80s. Meanwhile, whenever Sasha wasn't with Elise, he could be seen alone in his victor's village house, staring off into the distance. Sasha would die during the 202nd Hunger Games at the age of 93, leaving Elise and his other friends alone until they too would pass on. So yeah, guys, that is the end of basically my little where the victors are now sort of segment. So yeah, guys, if you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this one, then slap that like button. Also, before I continue showing the slides that are after this one, because yes, much like all my other videos, there are slides after the outro slide, showing off the victors. I know I already did a full showcase of, like, all the slides, but this one is just showcasing the slides of the victors mentioned in this video, starting with Avora Figaro and ending with Jezebel and Crystal. So yeah, I do want to mention that. I also want to mention that the Victory Tour posters for my victors are shown before their fully fledged slide that you saw in the last video is shown. I just want to mention those few things before we continue. Again, just like every single other time, I show off like victory or tribute posters. 5 seconds per slide, so if you want to pause and look at the slide, then feel free to do that, even though I'm sure you already did that in the previous video. Just, it's there. So anyways, yeah. But anyways, that's the end of today's little video. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to be posting another video. I had another idea. So, also, in between each century, I would put all the victors from that century into a Hunger Games simulator. Thank God for the experimental version of the Hunger Games simulator where you can add extra districts and add extra tributes per district. So I can actually do that now, which is really freaking cool. So yeah, the next video, which is uploaded tomorrow, will be a Hunger Games simulator with all of the victors that you see on this slide here, including the ones that were dead by the end of the 2nd century. It's just basically a thing for fun. It's not canon. It's just for fun. Don't worry about it. It'll be just the 2nd century victories. So yeah, but yeah, that's the end of this video. Just wanted to mention that, as well as the other things I mentioned. So yeah, let's get into, just showing the slides that are after this. Love y'all. Bye-bye.